The lights of the nocturnal city twinkled like scattered diamonds on the black velvet of the sky. Diana, holding her breath, stepped onto the threshold of the ancient mansion. Her heart pounded like a bird in a cage, and thoughts swirled in her head. She, young and fearless, dared to venture into the divination that both terrified and beckoned. The mirrored tunnel, shrouded in legends, promised answers to the most coveted questions. A cold wind swept past her as she stepped onto the porch. The old doors creaked open as if inviting her into a mysterious world. Diana crossed the threshold and found herself in a dark hallway. The walls were adorned with portraits of nobles, their dim eyes seemingly watching her closely. Their gazes felt condemning, as if they knew of her audacity. Summoning all her courage, Diana walked down the long corridor leading to the mirrored tunnel. Each of her echoing footsteps reverberated off the walls, multiplying and distorting. Finally, she stood before the entrance. Mirrors framed in gilded wood glimmered dimly. Diana hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. Mirrors surrounded her on all sides, reflecting her image endlessly. Diana ventured further, and suddenly the tunnel began to change. It felt as though she was walking through a temporal portal, as the images in the mirrors became increasingly blurred and then vanished altogether. Instead, different scenes emerged. She saw herself as a little girl, playing carefree in the garden. Then as a young lady, laughing sincerely with friends. And then the shadow of sadness on her face, disappointment and loss. Diana stopped, struck by what she saw. She never imagined divination could be so cruel, forcing her to relive the most painful moments of her life. Suddenly, in one of the mirrors, she saw a man. His face was familiar, but she couldn't recall where she had met him. He looked at her with sorrow and sympathy. Diana emerged from the mirrored tunnel, stunned and bewildered. It felt as though she had lived a lifetime in just a few minutes. She wandered through the mansion, searching for an exit, when she saw him again. The same man from the mirror stood before her. "Diana," he spoke softly. "I've been searching for you for so long." She couldn't utter a word, only silently gazed at him. His eyes, deep and dark, seemed familiar. "I'm Maxim," he continued. "We knew each other many years ago." Diana shuddered. Maxim? The same Maxim, her first love? The one who betrayed her and broke her heart? "It can't be," she whispered. "It's impossible." "It really is me," he confirmed. "I know what I've done, and I sincerely ask for forgiveness. I never stopped loving you." Diana didn't know what to think. Her feelings surged like an ocean during a storm. On one hand, she was genuinely glad to see Maxim. His image never left her heart, and the wound from his betrayal still ached. On the other hand, she couldn't forgive his recklessness. He barged into her life when she was young and trusting, promised her the world, and then vanished, leaving only pain and disappointment behind. "Why did you appear now of all times?" she asked coldly. Maxim sighed. "Things didn't go as planned back then. There were circumstances I couldn't tell you about. But believe me, I never intended to hurt you." He stepped closer, his hand reaching out as if he wanted to touch her, but hesitated at the last moment. Diana stepped back. She couldn't allow him to deceive her again. "Circumstances?" Her voice hardened. "You lied to me and left. What circumstances justify such betrayal?" Maxim lowered his head. "I can't tell you everything. But back then I had to make a difficult choice. And I chose not you." His words were like a sharp knife piercing her heart. She understood that the past couldn't be undone, but she wanted to understand why he acted the way he did. "Who is she?" Her voice trembled. Maxim raised his head and met her gaze. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I made a mistake. And now I want to make things right. Diana laughed bitterly. Make things right? How do you plan to fix broken trust and a shattered heart? I'll be honest with you, he promised. I'll tell you everything you want to know. And I'll be by your side as long as you allow me. He spoke sincerely and there was pain in his eyes. Perhaps he truly regretted his actions. But could she ever trust him again? Logic told her to push him away, forget and move on. She had built a successful life, become strong and independent. She didn't need someone who betrayed her. But her heart, stubborn and uncontrollable, whispered otherwise. It remembered youthful love, trust, and the happiness they once shared. Perhaps it was worth listening to him, giving him a chance to explain. Perhaps someday she could forgive. The decision weighed heavily on her. She looked at Maxim, at his pleading eyes, and couldn't find an answer. Suddenly, a deafening thunder roared, and the ancient mansion trembled. The wind howled through the broken window, and fallen autumn leaves swirled around the room. Diana looked around fearfully. It seemed as though nature reflected her inner turmoil. The storm raged not only over the mansion but also in her soul. We need to get out of here, Maxim said, taking her hand. His touch was warm and familiar, but she didn't pull away. They ran out of the mansion and took shelter under a sprawling oak tree. Rain poured down and the wind tore the last leaves from the trees. Diana shivered from the cold and excitement. Maxim took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It's dangerous here, he said. We need to find another shelter. They ran through the pouring rain seeking refuge. Finally, they stumbled upon a small, neglected gazebo. Entering inside, they huddled together to keep warm. The silence between them was thick and tense. Diana looked at Maxim, his face illuminated by the flash of lightning. It seemed familiar and yet alien to her. He had aged, wrinkles appearing on his face, but the features of the boy she once loved still shone through. The rain gradually ceased, replaced by silence after the thunder. The moon peeked out from behind the clouds, illuminating the night with its silvery glow. Do you want to talk? Diana asked quietly. Maxim sighed. Yes, I do. But not here, not now. It's a long story. He paused as if hesitating. Where do you live? Maybe I can walk you there? Diana gave him her address and they left the gazebo. They had to walk because the rain had washed away the road and no car could pass. They hardly spoke on the way. Diana was immersed in her thoughts, reliving the past over and over again. She understood that she had to make a decision. Whether to let Maxim back into her life or to put an end to this story. When they reached her house, Maxim stopped. Thank you for listening to me, he said. I understand if you don't want to see me anymore. Diana remained silent. She didn't know what to say. On one hand, she wanted to drive him away, on the other hand, she was curious to learn the truth, to hear his story. Give me your phone number, she finally said. Maxim raised an eyebrow in surprise. You want me to call you? Diana nodded. Yes. But only you. And only when you're ready to tell me everything. She gave him her number and quickly entered the house, not looking back. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her heart pounding like a bird in a cage. She didn't know what awaited her. Perhaps another disappointment. But for the first time in many years, hope arose in her heart. Hope for the truth, for forgiveness, and perhaps even for a new chance. Several days passed, but there was no call from Maxim. Diana alternated between anxiety and anger. She couldn't understand what she wanted more, to hear his voice or never to see him again. One evening as she was getting ready to go to bed, the phone rang. She picked up the receiver and it seemed to her as if time had stopped. "Diana?" "It's Maxim." His voice was so familiar and so stirring. "I'm ready to tell you everything." And then Diana realized that her adventure was only just beginning. "I'm ready to tell you everything," Maxim's voice echoed through the phone. Diana felt her heart constrict. She wanted to know the truth, but at the same time she was afraid of disappointment. "Come over tomorrow," she said quietly. "At noon." Maxim hung up and Diana couldn't sleep for a long time. She pondered over all the possible outcomes. What would he tell her? Why did he betray her? Could she ever forgive him? The next day Diana woke up feeling anxious. She didn't know what to expect. She wanted Maxim to show up, but at the same time she wished time would stand still. At noon the doorbell rang. Diana took a deep breath and went to answer it. Standing on the doorstep was Maxim. He looked a little older, his face tired, but his eyes sparkled with warmth. "Diana," he said, "I'm so glad to see you." She didn't know what to say. She simply nodded and invited him into the room. Maxim sat on the couch and took the cup of tea she offered him. "I know you want to know the truth," he said. "And I will tell you. But first I want you to know that I never stopped loving you." Diana lowered her eyes. It was hard for her to hold back the tears. "I was young and foolish," Maxim continued. "I was afraid of responsibility. When I realized you were pregnant, I panicked. I ran away to avoid facing the problems." He hung his head. "I know it's not an excuse. I was a terrible coward. But I sincerely ask you to forgive me." Diana remained silent. She tried to process his words. On one hand, she understood his fear. On the other hand, it was hard for her to forgive him for abandoning her in the most difficult moment. "I don't know," she said. "I need time to think." Maxim nodded. "I understand. You have the right to do so." He finished his tea and stood up. "I'll go. But I'll be waiting for your decision." He left the room and Diana was left alone with her thoughts. She didn't know what to do. She wanted to believe Maxim, but it was hard for her to forget the pain he had caused her. Days passed, but Diana still couldn't make a decision. She thought about Maxim, about what he had told her, about how he had appeared in her life after so many years. One day she was walking through the park when she suddenly saw a little girl playing in the sandbox. The girl looked very much like her. Diana stopped and watched her, feeling her heart squeeze. She suddenly realized that she couldn't live in the past. She had to forgive Maxim, not for him, but for herself. She went back home and dialed his phone number. "Maxim," she said. "I'm ready to listen to you." Maxim came to her that same day. He told her the whole truth about what had happened many years ago. He told her about his family, about his problems, about why he had been afraid and had run away. Diana listened to him and understood. She understood that he wasn't a monster, that he had just made a mistake. "I forgive you," she said when he finished. Maxim hugged her. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." Their embrace was long and warm. They seemed to have returned to the time when they were young and carefree. But now their relationship was different. They were more mature, more thoughtful. Several months passed. Diana and Maxim met often. They went for walks, talked for hours, told each other about their lives. They realized that their feelings for each other hadn't disappeared. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of Diana's apartment, watching the night city, Maxim handed her a small box. "Diana," he said, "will you marry me?" Diana was stunned. She didn't expect such a proposal. But as she looked at Maxim, at his sincere face, she realized she wanted to say yes. She took his hand. "Yes, Maxim," she said, "I will marry you." They got married 6 months later. The wedding was small but cozy. Only their closest friends and relatives were there. After the wedding, they went on their honeymoon to the island they had dreamed of visiting in their youth. They swam in the blue sea, sunbathed on the white sand, and enjoyed each other's company. Returning from their honeymoon, they started building their life together. They decided to leave the city and buy a house by the sea. Some time later, Diana found out she was pregnant. Maxim was over the moon with happiness. They were expecting a child, and now their family would be complete. Diana's pregnancy went smoothly. Maxim surrounded her with care and love. He did everything to make her happy. A baby girl was born. She looked just like Diana, just like that little girl she had seen on the playground once. They named her Sophia. Diana and Maxim's life changed completely. They were parents, and now all their thoughts and concerns were about little Sophia. But they didn't forget about themselves. They found time to be alone, to talk, to reminisce about the past and dream about the future. Fortune-telling in the mirror tunnel opened not only the doors to the past for Diana but also the doors to a new happy life. She realized that sometimes you have to let go of the past to open your heart to love and forgiveness. Diana looked at her little daughter, who was sleeping sweetly in the crib, and felt her heart overflowing with happiness. Her life had changed dramatically over the past few years, and she couldn't imagine it being any better. She remembered the day when Maxim appeared on her doorstep, like a ghost from the past. His words about betrayal and fear initially awakened old pain in her, but then she was able to forgive him. Their love, once young and carefree, rose from the ashes, becoming deeper and more mature. The wedding, the honeymoon, Sophia's birth, all these events flashed by like in a kaleidoscope. And now they were here, in this cozy house by the sea, a real family. Maxim, sitting at the table and reading a book, felt her gaze on him. He looked up and smiled. Their eyes met, and they radiated boundless love and understanding. "I'm happy," whispered Diana. Maxim nodded, never taking his eyes off her. "Me too." He stood up and approached her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "You know," he said, "I will never stop thanking you for forgiving me." Diana nestled against him. "It wasn't easy," she admitted. "But I realized I couldn't live in the past. I wanted to be with you." "And I'm with you," Maxim said. "And we will always be together." He kissed her gently and tenderly. And in that kiss there was everything: love, forgiveness, faith in the future. They stood there embracing and watched the sunset. The sky was painted in all shades of purple, orange, and gold. It was incredibly beautiful. "I love you," whispered Maxim. "I love you too," Diana replied. And they knew it was forever. And indeed, the years flew by like birds. Sophia grew up, transforming from a helpless baby into a curious girl with curls just as blonde as her mother's. She was their joy, the sun of their family sky. Diana sometimes recalled that fortune-telling evening, the mirror tunnel, and the eerie journey into the past. It remained forever etched in her memory as a boundary that divided life into a before and a after. One day, while Sophia was playing in the backyard, building a sand castle, Diana found an old trunk in the attic. Opening it, she saw their notes, photographs, and trinkets from their youth, hers and Maxim's. Among them was a small, slightly yellowed photograph where the two of them, young and in love, laughed carelessly by the sea. Diana took it in her hands and felt a wave of nostalgia. She remembered that day, the smell of salty wind, the sand under her feet, and the incredible happiness that filled her then. Suddenly Maxim's voice came from the hallway. He was asking something of Sophia. Diana smiled. Her life had turned out just as she had dreamed of once. She walked to the window and looked at the man playing with their daughter. He also noticed her and raised his head. They met each other's gaze, and in it, just like many years ago, there was love, understanding, and warmth. Diana approached the trunk and took out another photograph, a new one, taken last summer. It was of her, Maxim, and Sophia, all three sun-kissed and happy, standing on the same beach where they had once been photographed as young lovers. Life, like that mirror tunnel, was full of surprises and turns. But the main thing was that they went through it together, hand in hand, and found their happiness. And the past, though not always pleasant, became just a signpost that led them to this moment. The story of their love, although it had a break, ultimately became even more beautiful and precious. Thank you for being with us today. I hope that this story has brought you emotions. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell so you don't miss any of our new stories. Thank you for your support. You are the best.